Alfred and Bruce return to the Batcave in preparation for Dick Grayson's funeral. A death in the family is never easy, but both of them are taking it exceptionally hard. Bruce, far more so than his honorary father. Sure, Alfred lost what feels like a grandson, but Bruce lost what feels like a kid and blames himself for it. If he had taken out Joker all those years ago, then this would have never happened. He begins thinking about other people who died because of his actions. His decision not to kill villains who most likely went on to murder other hundreds of people. Each one of those lives was somebody's son or daughter. It could have been somebody's mother or father. He can never imagine having to bury his own kids, although this time it's not imaginary. But it appears as if he won't be burying his son either, as it seems Dick's entire body was destroyed when both Bruce and Superman had their incredible battle. Nevertheless, his son is still dead, and that's punishment enough for his mistakes. He's chosen to accept killing, but only when necessary, and having Alfred there to guide him, he's confident he won't stray from his path any longer. There is one person, or maybe two in particular, who don't really believe this though, at least not yet. This being Superman and Supergirl, Clark Kent and Kara Zor-El. Otherwise known as the people that Batman kicked the crap out of last episode, and specifically sent into deep space, and gather enough solar power to come back here and knock some sense into him. The only problem is that he already changed his ways and they don't know that. He has a pretty defeatist mindset right now and thus obliges them in their attempt to fight him, although Alfred will not let that stand. The butler says that he has everything under control. Bruce will not be harming anybody and the Joker was not killed. Well, not by Bruce. But none of this was any of their concern, not at any time. It was a Wayne family problem and it was taken care of by that very same family. So he'll have to politely ask them to leave. They have other matters to attend to. Kara would step in, shouting that they're not just going to leave while that bat-shaped psycho is still on the loose. Clark tries to get her to calm down, although she tells Kal-El to shut his mouth. She got beaten to waste a Sunday just so that this murderous psychopath could go on a killing spree. Her job is to stop bad guys from doing bad things, and she's not just going to stop here because some weird butler tells her to. I was hoping to solve this problem diplomatically, although it seems it's come to a more physical approach. He then walks over to a painting of himself on the wall, taking it down and revealing a safe. He inputs a code, 0219, then pulling out a pair of brass knuckles, although rather than made from brass, they're composed of a certain not-so-rare stone. Kara becomes quickly silent as she realizes what those are. Alfred walks over before explaining further. I'd rather not lay hands on a woman, although all pleasantries go out the window when you try and harm my family. Now again, I ask you to leave. Kal-El had already not wanted to cause any problems, and thus was fine with just taking his leave, although Kara here was easily persuaded to do the same. After the Kryptonians leave, Alfred instructs Bruce to invite them to some form of a get-together before the funeral is set to take place. Wouldn't want to have some of Dick's closest friends be excluded from his funeral. And while Mr. Pennyworth begins focusing on preparing the day itself, Bruce uses his detective skills to find out what exactly happened to Dick's body. He could have sworn it was still there when he left the Batcave, although suddenly when he got back it just wasn't. He has no idea what could have happened, save the idea that Dick was somehow still alive and just walked out. But no, that's unrealistic optimism. If that happened, they would have known. The only conclusion he's left to come to is somebody stole the body. But who could have done it? Kal-El and Kara were still up in space, and there's no way they got back down that fast. They most likely just arrived to the Batcave at the same time Bruce and Alfred did, and they have no reason to take Dick's body anywhere. For a moment, he suspects Raditz, but the Saiyan had already been living with Diana and the rest of the other Saiyans, so it couldn't have been him, as Bruce would have sensed him arriving to the Batcave, and again, he would have no use for Robin's body. But then it hits him. Talia al Ghul. She was one of the few people who had access to the Batcave, and she also had the Lazarus Pit, as her father was able to remain young as well as incredibly powerful by using that very same pit to restore his life generation after generation. He then transforms into Super Saiyan for the enhanced senses, being able to hear a bug placed in the Batcave. One night while Bruce and Talia were getting jiggy with it, she must have placed a recording device somewhere in the cave. That way, her and her father were able to track any movements that Bruce made. He forgot that his one weakness was hot goth girls, affection. And the second a woman showed it to him, he grasped onto it. He felt vulnerable for the first time in years. But it turns out that when you feel vulnerable, you actually are. It's one of the very many reasons Bruce doesn't let his guard down. Now, maybe he'll gain some sense and actually go out with Selena Kyle. I've practically been yelling it at the screen ever since I watched Gotham for the first time. I know, incredibly off topic, but Cameron B. Condova is hot as hell. Back on topic though, Bruce would arrive at the home of Talia al Ghul and ask what she did with Dick's body. She says that she has no idea what he means, although she presents her condolences, but Bruce then transforms into Super Saiyan, while still in casual clothes, before then slamming Talia against a wall, holding her by the neck.
I'm not here to play games, Talia. Where is my son?
She says, probably in a better place, although for a split second her eyes motion downwards, giving Bruce all he needs to know. He powers down to base, that way he has more control over his ki, then shooting a couple rapid-fire ki blasts at the ground, barreling through meters of rubble, before stopping when he realizes that he's reached an open area, floating down to see what's down there, and seeing multiple people, although most notably, his thought to be dead son. He rushes over and gives Dick a hug. Although looking in his son's eyes, he sees no warmth, no life. There's still somebody staring back at him, although it most definitely isn't a person, just a body walking. It's almost zombie-like, but he's definitely still in there somewhere. Dick is alive, although he can't feel anything.
He's not going to hug you back, Bruce. Took me months my first time to even say a word. Raj. In the flesh. Thanks to me, your son is too.
Bruce is conflicted. On one hand, he's ever so thankful to have his son back to life, although on the other, he's a husk of who he was before. He's nowhere near the happy-go-lucky kid that Batman adopted. Instead, he's just some corpse standing there. But even if he's conflicted, Batman isn't going to let this chance go. If there's even the slightest opportunity he's able to have his son back, he'll do anything to make that happen. They head back to Wayne Manor and attempt to put Dick's mind back together. Piece by piece, eventually they're able to, although what he says is absolutely heartbreaking. I want to go back to Mom and Dad. Understand that this version of Dick Grayson isn't the same one we see later on. Bruce himself is only in his early 20s, so Dick is only a teenager right now, and a young one at that. And even if he was older, he would still have nowhere near the same willpower Jason Todd did, and it's not like he has a goal either. The Joker is already dead, and he's not a very vengeful person. And without that drive, I don't think he'd be able to survive this. The Lazarus Pit doesn't bring you back, at least not whole. You're alive, but things are missing. Your memories are there, but they're like visions. It's like you're not the one in them. Your feelings aren't really there. You're not a person. You're just a thing standing around in a place where you don't belong. And now, more conflicted than ever, Bruce tells Alfred to stay with Dick, before then heading back to Ra's al Ghul's place. He asks for any information on how to bring Dick back fully, not just a husk of who he was, but the actual person there too. Sadly, Talia informs him there's no way. There's no true way to attain immortality or to come back from the dead. It's just not possible in the way Bruce wants. However, Dick is still alive, and after time passes, the whole feeling like you don't belong in the living world will begin to fade, after a couple of years at least. But then Bruce asks if they've ever done this on a kid before. He was still forming who he was, he didn't know how to feel, and now they've brought him back as if he's supposed to figure it out like everybody else. Although Bruce's objections don't change anything, though Talia does bring up that they could always send him back. Sitting in silence for a couple of moments, Bruce states that is absolutely not an option, before barging out and going in search of any other answers. He goes to his master Kami, who is the guardian of Earth and does have some dominion over life and death, at least in his connection to King Yema, who is actually the person who decides whether you go to heaven or hell. Bruce asks if there's any way to bring somebody back from the dead. Well, bring somebody's soul back, as their body has actually already been restored. To which Kami says, no, not traditionally, although there is a magical approach to be taken. Bruce, however, groans at this response. He's not technically allowed to learn magic. He tried to from Zatanna years ago, although she said people like him just aren't allowed to. But that's not exactly what Kami was referring to. Instead, he's talking about Namekian Dragon Clan techniques, chief of which is the creation of the dragonballz, 7 mystical wish orbs that can grant any wish. Batman asks why this has never been brought up to him before, to which Kami says that he just never asked. Bruce then asks how he's supposed to go and find these Dragon Balls, but Kami explains that he can just summon them all there. After all, he is the one who created them. Normally, you're supposed to go out and find them, kinda like a treasure hunt, but Bruce is kinda ruining the whole mood, so Kami would rather just summon them here. With a single tap of his staff, Kami calls 7 shooting stars in the form of Dragon Balls to the lookout. Kami then tells Bruce the phrase to summon Shinron, saying it has to be stated exactly like this: "Come forth, divine dragon, pretty please." Bruce is definitely a bit suspicious of this, although he goes about it anyway, approaching the Dragon Balls before saying,
Come forth, divine dragon. Pretty please.
Piccolo begins laughing hysterically in the background, while Kami lets out a slight chuckle. Either way, Shinron is summoned, and thus Bruce states his wish. He wants to have his son be restored to how he was before the Joker, well, murdered him. His body is still technically alive, but he just wants to have his mental state fully restored. And honestly, the Lazarus Pit might be too powerful for Shinron to override. Although, since I don't want this part to have an overly bleak ending, we're going to say it works. Shinron glows his eyes red, and Robin returns to how he was before, in absolute peak mental and physical condition. A smile spreads across the young man's face for the first time in what feels like ages. Alfred is absolutely dumbstruck that Bruce actually found a way to do this, although he is more than anything happy to have his grandson back. Bruce thanks his old master for the help, before then returning to Wayne Manor to spend some time with his son.